Catholic Moments is sponsored by CatholicMatch.com, the leading Catholic singles community. Being single can be a challenge. Catholic Match helps make it a little easier. To get started today, visit CatholicMatch.com/Lisa.
Finding joy in the journey and hope in the heaven yet to come.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Moments. And now, here's your host and my mom, Lisa Hendy.
Hey everyone, Lisa Hendy from CatholicMom.com and the Catholic Moments podcast. It's a little bit different start to the podcast episode this week as I come to you live from the campus of the University of Notre Dame. So you just heard the beautiful sounds of one of the mass choirs there. I was lucky enough to walk in to visit at the Basilica and find them rehearsing, so I thought I'd share a moment of that with you. And I'm here this week for a few days to attend some alumni meetings and then to conduct a small presentation and book signing on Saturday. So welcome to another episode of Catholic Moments, the show from CatholicMom.com, where we bring you all things faith, family, and fun from a Catholic perspective. And this week's perspective is coming to you from South Bend, Indiana. Just spent the last few days over in Chicago and had a fantastic time. I really enjoyed my event Tuesday night with the mothers of the St. Clement Mom Spirituality Group, and we had a great night there conducting a brief retreat for them. And then last night over at the Pauline Book and Media Center on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and I got to have supper with Sister Helena Burns, one of my favorite and a totally cool daughter of St. Paul, and just great bookstore there. And I had such a great time there last night with family and friends out for a book signing, and that was terrific too. So made the drive over here to Indiana this morning, and we'll be here for the next couple of days. And I've been to the grotto for a rosary and to the Basilica and to some meetings, and just I'm looking forward to a relaxing time for the next few days here on campus before that event on Saturday. If you happen to be listening anywhere in the Indiana area, come on out Saturday. The Ham's bookstore on the Notre Dame campus at 1 o'clock on April 17th. And this week's podcast is going to come to you straight through. We're just going to hear from all of our great contributors, Deacon Tom Fox, who you can find over at www.deacontomonline.com. Will be our first up, and then followed by our dear friend Avery, who's back from her spring break this week with a great reflection. Of course, Avery can be found over at livewtl.com, her fantastic podcast. And then we're going to hear from Lisa Mladnick of amazingcatechist.com. And finally from Sarah Bauer, not Sarah Bauer. I'm thinking of Sarah Bauer because I'm here in Indiana. Sarah Reinhardt with this week's Mary Moment. And Sarah can be found at snoringscholar.com. This is going to be it for my part of the podcast this week, and I wish you a wonderful week. I hope you guys are having a great week. I do want to give one shout out to my good friend Daniel from the Special Chronicles podcast. I had the joy of having lunch with Daniel and a couple of other new friends this week while in Chicago, and it was really fun to meet him. And I just want to remind you to visit Daniel's Special Chronicles podcast. You can find that by searching for Special Chronicles over at iTunes, and we'll also have a link in the show notes. And I'm so happy that he's agreed to become a new contributor to CatholicMom.com, so you can find him on CatholicMom.com sharing his journalistic articles there as well. So let's hear now from everyone's favorite online deacon, Deacon Tom Fox, and I hope you and yours have a wonderful week.
The other day I tried something new. I went on the web asking for suggestions about what to include as a topic in today's Deacon Moment. Many of you know Mark S. from Philadelphia. His words and thoughts are often seen. In reply to my question about today's Deacon Moment, Mark pondered, How do we really have hope in the Lord when we live in the world that delights in scandals? Jesus overcame death, he says, yet this feels like a series of little deaths. What can we do? Well, for Mark and any of you who feel weighed down by the news of these days, my answer is perspective. An example. We used to live in Colorado, and I wouldn't exactly say that Colorado was languishing before the 1993 visit of John Paul II. Many of you remember his U.S. visit when he led a World Youth Day celebration. This conference attracted an estimated 150,000 people who endured much to bask in the beauty of God's majestic Rockies. They say 87,000 jammed Denver's Mile High Stadium to listen to the Pope speak. This conference was truly of historic importance because it united many American Catholics who had heretofore felt alienated from the Church on many issues. The persona, the charisma of Pope John Paul II was so strong that it produced incredibly profound feelings of commitment, even among Catholics who had strongly differed with the Church. One person exclaimed after she grasped John Paul's hand, "It was just so incredible. He radiates peace." Other people shook his hand and reportedly wept as they kissed his ring. Today, Colorado is a state that boasts vibrant faith communities, a dynamic and fearless Archbishop Charles Chaput, a new and upcoming Auxiliary Bishop James Conley. There are charismatics. There are many youth and young adult groups. They've gone from one closed seminary to now having 2 seminaries full of men studying for the priesthood. They have dozens of applicants for the deacon program each year. They have consecrated virgins and lay groups such as the Beatitudes. And as I think of all of this, my mind goes back to the short Colorado visit by Pope John Paul II. He said, "It is He, Jesus Christ, the true life, who gives hope and purpose to our earthly existence. He opens our minds and hearts to the goodness and beauty of the world around us." And so, Mark, perspective is what comes to mind this beautiful spring day, still radiant in Easter joy. Christ can worry about the New York Times. We are God's people, His church, the Catholic Church, which has the sacraments and apostolic succession. These triumphed over the scandals and schisms of 2,000 years ago. It will triumph over our scandals, sins, and warts of today. This is Deacon Tom. Easter blessings.
Hi, this is Avery from the Live WTL podcast, bringing you this week's Teen Moments. Okay, well, for Easter, my parents got us these little books that have some different quotes and meditations in them, and I was flipping through it, looking at some of the things and reading through it, and there was one quote that really spoke to me that I really liked and liked meditating on, and here's the quote. I have no idea who said this, but it was a good quote. "Why, my friends, would we not embrace every day? For even among the challenges in life, when we look closely, a challenge is just a blessing in disguise. When ridden of our vanities of this world, and when we see Christ, we see the true blessing that every waking moment truly reveals itself as." And it's an unknown author, but I just thought it was a beautiful quote and a beautiful way to reflect on, every moment that we're given as a blessing and embracing everything we have. And I really like the message of it because sometimes, especially as teenagers, we can get wrapped up in our own worldly desires and things and drama at school and at home and with our friends and all that. And we can really find it hard, and we don't really know how sometimes, to surrender ourselves to God. And here's a beautiful prayer of serenity that I'm sure you've probably heard before. And here's how it goes. "God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And that's a beautiful prayer because sometimes, in serenity, sometimes we try so hard to be holy that it's difficult to know what we're really called to do sometimes, I guess, if that makes sense. And that's a wonderful prayer. The serenity that God can give us can really guide us through that. And one other verse, Proverbs 3:5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And these are not easy prayers to pray by any means when you're really reflecting on it, because we can find it difficult many times to surrender beyond our own hearts. Sometimes our hearts that are a bit selfish and a bit hypocritical sometimes, and truly dedicate our lives towards Christ and trying our hardest to spend every moment that he's given us living towards him. And spirituality and our relationship with God, it's a lifelong journey, and no one is perfect. However, it's our calling and it's our responsibility to embrace the blessings that we have every day amidst our sometimes seemingly difficult lives and trust God with our lives. And so to end off today, here's a wonderful quote and actually a prayer by St. Ignatius Loyola. Take, O Lord, and receive my entire liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my whole will. All that I am and all that I possess you have given me. I surrender it all to you to be disposed of according to your will. Give me only your love and your grace. With these I will be rich enough, and I will desire no more. So there's a prayer and a meditation for today. With something to think about, I'm Avery, and this was your Teen Moment.
Hi, this is Lisa Mladnick from AmazingCatechist.com with another Amazing Minute. Let's talk about the need for self-discipline when teaching the faith. It is vital that you run a tight ship. Set a good example by coming to class early, fully prepared, and raring to go. What you project sets the tone for the whole class. Think in terms of spirit, mind, and body. A prayer before you enter the classroom, a focused lesson plan, and a quick check in the mirror to see that you are clean and neat. It's all part of your presentation. Remember, spirit, mind, and body. Keep in mind that everything you do tells the children what to think of you and what to think of your message. Now, nobody's perfect, and we all have bad days. Maybe it's hard for you to get from work to the parish on time. Maybe you're upset about something or not feeling well. Place this in God's hands. Do your best with what you've got, and trust him to do the rest. He never fails those who trust him. This has been another Amazing Minute from AmazingCatechist.com. Thank you, and God bless you.
Our next guest today on Catholic Moments is Father William Nicholas. Father Nicholas is a priest of the Archdiocese of San Francisco, currently serving at Our Lady of Loretto Parish in Novato, California, in northern Marin County. He was ordained in June of 2001 and is a regular columnist for the Catholic San Francisco Sun, the diocesan paper in San Francisco, and the author of a great book entitled I Saw the World End, An Introduction to Bible's Apocalyptic Literature, available through Paulus Press. Father Nicholas has taught classes in adult faith formation in both Scripture and Liturgy since becoming a priest in his first assignment, and we're very happy today to welcome him to Catholic Moments. Thank you so much for being here, Father Nicholas.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, it's a real treat. We always love having priests on the show, and especially during this year for priests, we're very happy to have you here. I'd like to ask you to begin by sharing a little bit about yourself and perhaps a little introduction to how you found your priestly vocation.
Well, I was born and raised in Southern California. Strangely enough, I ended up in the Bay Area as a priest. But I have to admit, the question I least like is when people ask me to tell my vocation story, because more often than not, they expect to hear some inspirational story of God speaking to your heart and so on and so forth. But frankly, it was actually a very practical story. Ever since I was a kid in Catholic school, we're always praying for more vocations, more priests and religious vocations. To serve the people of God. And about halfway through high school, I began to think to myself, well, what about me? We're always praying for other people to become priests or religious, or especially parents are always praying, Lord, give us more priests, but not my child. And I just started thinking, well, what about me? And it just, over time, it eventually grew on me, and I did enter the seminary out of high school at St. John's in Camarillo, but I eventually moved up to the Bay Area and completed my seminary studies in St. Patrick's in Menlo Park and was ordained in the year 2001. So, but the more I got into it, the more it grew on me, and there was always that lingering sense, could it be something else, could it be something else? But on ordination day, it was pretty sure this was it.
That's a good time to be sure. And, I'm actually, as a mom and one who's constantly harping on praying for vocations and trying to tell my sons that that's, a great possibility for your life. I'm happy to hear that those prayers work in a case like yours. So you actually went all the way through college and graduate school in the seminary.
Yeah, that's correct.
Amazing. And do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I'm the oldest of four. I have two sisters, and in between them, one brother. And, they are all in Southern California, but I'm still close to them and keep in touch. Got two nephews that got to see them every now and again. And my folks are still down in Southern California. Do they make it up very often to hear you say Mass? Not as often as I think they would like to. My mother works for the Archdiocese of San Francisco currently, and that keeps her pretty busy. My dad is still working. And my brother has some special needs, and that often keeps them grounded in Los Angeles. He has some handicaps. He's hard of hearing and other special needs. However, he also works at a Borders bookstore in the Santa Anita Mall. So they like to keep him on his work schedule, and so that continues to be successful. So that and other factors kind of keep him in Southern California. But I'm very mobile. One good thing about being in the Bay Area is you're never far from an airport. Yeah, that's an amazing thing. Well, you need to be close to an airport because so much of the work that you do, you're a parish priest, but you're also very actively involved in adult faith formation and giving missions and speaking. Tell us a little bit more about that part of your ministry. Well, actually, it kind of, again, grew from just very simple beginnings. The adult faith formation began at the request of the people in the parish. I was ordained a deacon around the year 2000, and the people were just curious. It's the year 2000 and the world hasn't ended. How do we look at apocalyptic writings? And that was the first class I gave, and that was very successful. After that, I did a class, on the Gospels. One year I did about a few sessions on St. Paul. They asked to do one on liturgy, and it kind of grew from there, and I've given the different classes a couple of times. The people have been very grateful. My goal is basically put things in everyday language for everyday people. I'm not, elevated scripture scholar. I mean, I hope what I learned in the seminary isn't completely worthless in the work I do in the parish. And I have done extra studies just on my own because you want to enhance the notes and the knowledge you have as you're preparing these classes. But it's been mainly the people that have kept me going and have said, when's the next class? Can you give one on this topic or on that topic? The parish missions, I've really done one big one. It was for a friend of mine in Saipan, believe it or not. Really? And he really wanted me to visit out there. And I remember telling him, I said, I'd love to visit Saipan myself. Unfortunately, flights can be expensive. And he said, well, if you come out and give a parish mission, then we can take care of it. And so I said, okay. And we talked about it over a couple of years, and we managed to plan it. And it was a great trip, a wonderful time. And I gave a Lenten renewal over one of the weeks of Lent from Monday through Friday and just talked about basic topics. What is the 40 days? Are 40 days in the desert a time of penance and preparation? Temptation being a reality during Lent. When we give something up, we're naturally inviting temptation, and how does that work into Lent? The sacrifices, offering these gifts back to God that we recognize are tremendous gifts that God has given to us. And what are we preparing for? This great sacrament of reconciliation and forgiveness on the cross and the great celebration of the resurrection. And so these were just very basic aspects of our Lenten journey, not elevated theology, but looking at these in a more in-depth and a new way, these traditions that perhaps we've just kind of taken for granted because they're so routine. And I have found that has really been the most successful. Talk to the people about things they're familiar with and give them a deeper understanding of what this is all about. Why do we give up things for Lent, individually and collectively as a community? Because we do things as church, but we also do things individually. Well, I think that's such a wonderful way to approach it. And I have to tell you,
I have so much admiration for priests in so many ways, but nowadays it seems like that your job is so complicated by, different regulations that are in place now that maybe weren't in place, 10 or 15 years ago. And the relationship that a priest can have with his parishioners is different now than I remember growing up. And I'm certainly older than you are, but, I think this educational role that you're able to take and to make a parish more than just the place that we show up on Sunday for 1 hour, but really more of the family that God wants us to have in one another, and those weekday opportunities for things like that are so wonderful. I wish more priests were able to take the time that you do to do that.
Well, many priests do many different things, and they all have various gifts. I mean, I know another priest here in Novato at the other parish. He loves going to the hospitals and loves visiting the sick people. And there are some priests, that is their ministry, of visiting in the hospital. While I certainly visit sick parishioners when they are in the hospital and in the home, I don't know that that's something I'd want to dedicate full time. For me, it's adult faith formation, and for others, some are really dedicated to canon law, others to teaching in the high schools. I like to focus on the people in the parish, because these are the ones who make our parishes work, and our role is to help strengthen and inform their faith. So my focus really is on the people in the parishes. How do you make this real for them?
Well,
in addition to routine.
It sounds like you've done a wonderful job of that in the 3 parishes that you've been in. We're about a little over midway through this wonderful year for priests that the Holy Father has granted us for this year. And I'd love to just know, sort of from a priest's perspective, how the year has been for you so far, and what it's meant to you to have had this proclaimed from the Vatican.
Well, I was very gratified to read about it. That he had declared a year for priests, because it is so important to appreciate this important tradition and this charism we have in our church that I have been fortunate enough to be called in. And it's an opportunity to really talk about the dynamic of the work of priests, not just endlessly talk about myself and my vocation, but what is involved in being a priest for the church. For example, in January, I believe it was the last Sunday in January, the gospel was of Jesus' debut in Nazareth, and it ended with them wanting to throw him over the cliff. And in my homily, I actually worked that in, not to kind of wag the finger at people at the times they want to throw me over a cliff, but that is a reality in working as a priest. Every now and again, you run into some people who don't like to hear what you have to say, or really struggle with the message of the church, not just with me individually as a priest, but with the message of the church. Sometimes the great contempt that our faith is held in our society. Sometimes it's, I say Christianity in general, Catholicism in particular. And yet there are other readings from the Old and New Testament of the Gospel which speak of the ministry of the priest in terms of the shepherd or in terms of the fisherman. And in many ways, it's not just our call as priests, it's everyone's call as followers of Christ. We have that sacramental ministry and that call to preach the gospel in homilies, but everyone is called to bear witness to that gospel. And in many ways, Augustine's words, I'm a Catholic with you and a priest for you, is very real for us, that our story as priests is everyone's story as followers of Christ in whatever vocation they find themselves in. And so that's kind of some of the ways I've come to at least appreciate this year for priests, is because they want to hear about the ministry of priesthood. But the more I think about it, the more I preach it, I'm thinking, this is everyone's role. Not that we're all sacramental ministers, but we are all called to live and preach the gospel in that way, to be fishers of souls, to be shepherds, be it to our parish community or to our children, to our students, where bishops are concerned, to their diocese. And in many ways, it kind of wakes everyone up that our church has the ministerial priesthood, but the call of the ministerial priesthood reflects and is in conjunction with the call of everyone to be those faithful followers of Christ.
Our guest again today is Father William Nicholas, and I want to point everybody over to his wonderful website, fathernicholas.com. You can also find him through the Our Lady of Loretto Parish website, but over at fathernicholas.com, you'll find his homilies recorded every week, which is just an absolutely wonderful resource for, people to have. You'll find writings and articles that Father Nicholas has done. And I'd like to have you tell us a little bit more about the book that you've written, and just kind of want to make sure that we know that's out there as a resource. Can you tell people a little bit about what you were aiming for with the book?
Well, I wrote it out as I was giving the class, as I was preparing for the different sessions, and I had the time. It was a little ways before I was ordained, or it began at that period, and was a work in progress for a few years. But what I was aiming in that is answering people's questions, because the book of Revelation is perhaps one of the least read books in the Bible, and yet the most feared, or at least the one that has the most anticipation attached to it. People don't know what to make of it. And then you have the book of Daniel, which is among the prophetic books, but is really actually an apocalyptic book in terms of the style and the period from which it came. And we're familiar with those stories. Daniel in the lion's den, the men in the fiery furnace. But he also has the visions that he has, which could also be subjects of great anticipation and guesswork, and people don't know what to make of them. And the more I learned about what these books were about and the style of writing that was involved in bringing them about, the more interested I became, loving the whole tradition of symbolism, even mythology, the mythological images that they include, the dynamism of the message. In many ways, these are not oppressive books. These are very, very uplifting books, talking about the triumph of God, that God is in control. And also sometimes very foreboding, that even though one may be experiencing persecution, God does have a purpose in this. We often don't like to hear that, because we want to hear of salvation and redemption and rescue. But the idea that even the difficult times we go through, God has a purpose in that. And these books came out of tremendous periods of persecution, but are a product of great faith in spite of that persecution. And as such, they are in many ways the ultimate pep talks to persecuted communities, to inspire and instill faith so that the people can endure. And because it's a universal message, they're very, very relevant to us even today. But ironically, we don't hear from the book of Revelation that often in Sunday liturgy.
Yeah,
but it does happen.
Sort of a special occasion type of thing. And I told you before we started recording that I've had the occasion to study it a few times, and still am making heads or tails of much of what's in there. So I definitely want to pick up a copy of I Saw the World End, which is Father Nicholas's book. And we'll have we'll have links in our show notes for you to be able to go over and check out Father's website as well as that book. And I want to say, too, that I know you make yourself available to other parishes for education and formation opportunities. How might people best get in touch with you if they'd be interested in bringing you out to their parish for a talk?
The best way is through my parish. The best is through the phone number of Our Lady of Loretto Parish. And if in the next few months I am transferred, that information will be on my website, which is frwcnicholas.com. That's frwcnicholas.com. The email to this parish is on that website, and the phone number can be looked up through the Archdiocesan website. And, just leave me a message, and hopefully I'll be able to get back to you. But I'd be happy to contribute in any way I can to the life of the parish.
So how is that as far as being, at this point you're a parochial vicar in your parish, and I know as priest that you are obedient to your bishop and you go where he sends you, but how is that to begin to bond with, I think maybe this is a question from the pew here. It's undoubtable that people in your parish have fallen in love with you and, you've made friendships and things like that. How is it to pick up and move as frequently as you've done since your ordination?
Fortunately, being a priest in the Archdiocese of San Francisco, nothing is ever very far away. The Archdiocese goes as far south as Menlo Park, which is near Stanford University, and I'm as far north as I can get in Novato. And the 2 points are a little over an hour apart driving. So the Archdiocese itself isn't very big. And so, wherever I move, I'm never far from the people I've come to know.
Well, that's a good thing, and I bet you have some of them that come from your other parishes to visit you on Sundays and hear your homilies and things.
Every now and again. But I like to encourage people to, to stick to their parishes, because their life in the parish isn't about me or about an individual priest. I'm gratified, and I'm always happy to see them. But they know. I like them to be respectful of where they are. That's their parish community, and of course they're always welcome. But it may sound a bit harsh, but sometimes I want to think, last time I checked, Jesus was the center of our faith.
You're right, and the Eucharist. And ironically, it took a situation in my own personal life. My friends know about this, and people who've read the book that I have know about this, that one of the times when I was the most disappointed with pastor that I was living under is the time that I felt the closest to the Eucharist. So I think there's some beauty in what you've said there, and definitely some truth in my own life. And, you come, I need to ask you, because so many of our listeners, and we have listeners really literally from all around the world, hear about us living out here in California and think that, we're our own brand of crazy. And your particular diocese, the Archdiocese of San Francisco, has been off and on in the news over the last few years for different things. How is it to serve as a faithful priest in that particular archdiocese?
It's a great place to be Catholic, and even better place to be a priest. Because there is a very dynamic population here in San Francisco. It's a beautiful city, and the sights are wonderful, the culture is wonderful, and there's a real diversity within the Archdiocese. The wine country isn't very far. You've got Silicon Valley to the south, and you've got the city itself with all its beauty and its monuments, its sites. But, as you know, we've heard of the city in the news. I mean, some of the pundits love to take their jabs at the socio-political culture in San Francisco, and they speak of San Francisco values. But San Francisco also has a wonderful history of being a very, very Catholic town.
Right.
It may not seem as much nowadays, but at least that's in the history. And the name of the city itself, San Francisco de Assisi, the city is named for a tremendous saint of great humility and great peace and great submission to the will of our Heavenly Father. And he made that distinction in his life, as opposed to his human father and his heavenly Father. And as secular or as however politically charged, however you want to put it, the city is still named St. Francis. And it's a good reminder of people in that. I'll never forget when we had the city had their kind of like a civic prayer service for those killed after 9/11. Mm-hmm. And every couple of speakers, you hear a political comment here or a social comment there. And those made the news, and some people got very fired up by them. Our Archbishop stepped forward, and at that time it was Archbishop William Loretto, who's now Cardinal Loretto in Rome. And he simply reminded everyone that the city was named for St. Francis, and he simply read the prayer of St. Francis, which was, "Make me an instrument of your peace." And that made me very proud to be a Catholic in San Francisco, that with everything everyone was saying, the good things, the provocative things, our leader in the Catholic Church, named for a saint, in a city named for a saint, stepped forward and just simply read his prayer.
Amazing. Well, I've been so blessed to attend Mass and be, present at liturgies and formation experiences in different parts of your archdiocese, and I concur with your opinion. So I'm happy to hear it from you, though, as well. Well, Father, we're just about out of time. And are there any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners before we let you get back to your parish?
Just thank you for letting me come on your podcast. And we are all in this together in many ways, whether we're from San Francisco or Fresno or from the East Coast. And just keep in mind that for me, the mission of a priest is the title of my webpage, and it's taken from Luke chapter 22:32, and Jesus says, "I've prayed that your faith may never fail." And I believe for us as priests, for parents to their children also, but anyone who are shepherds of souls, in this year of the priest, I would like to remind that our mission is that your faith may never fail. And please pray for priests that they will be successful in that mission, regardless of what we do and how we do it. Ultimately, our mission is to help strengthen your faith so that, come what may, it may never fail. And that, in many ways, is a theme in the book that I wrote. That's the purpose of Revelation. People going through persecution, something written to keep their faith strong. And but definitely pray for your priests. Pray for more priests, and not just quantity, but quality men to serve as priests, and quality men and women to serve as religious brothers and sisters.
Well, please be assured of our prayers, and I want to thank you again so much, Father William Nicholas, for the time that you spent today on Catholic Moments. And everyone, head over to the show notes wherever you're listening to this show for links to Father Nicholas's wonderful book and his website as well. And thank you so much for your time, Father.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Hello, my name's Elizabeth.
And my name's Sarah Reinhardt.
It's time for Mary Moment.
I have a guilty confession. I wasn't going to share it here, but then I shared it on Facebook and Twitter this week and was so astounded by the response from other Catholic moms that I wanted to talk a little bit about it here during this week's Mary Moment. My post on Facebook and Twitter had to do with my first word being a certain synonym for manure that has 4 letters and is generally not acceptable for people of a certain age to be shouting. It started as a humorous sort of thing for me. My mom was telling me that it was one of my first words, and I had to laugh because it has taken me many, many years to be better about my potty mouth, and that particular word is still a crutch for me when I'm surprised by anger or hurt or some combination. As I've aged and matured and, well, changed a bit, I've come to see language differently. I used to think it was my right to use whatever language I wanted. I used to think that it didn't matter, and it was fun to cuss in a way that would make my sailor brother blush. Maybe it's Mary's fault that I changed my mind, because when those kinds of words come out of my mouth now, I inevitably think of her. Those words don't bring me closer to God, though I do sometimes use them when I'm shaking my fist in His direction. Those words don't make me better at my vocations as wife and mother. And maybe, more importantly, they don't take my thoughts to a place where I'm closer to Jesus. Instead, they direct my thoughts at my own anger and pain. They force me down into the dirt they evoke in my mind, and they slide me backwards down toward the slippery slope of more serious sin. But, my friends, I still use some of those words, and especially that stinky, smelly one that I started my use of English with. Maybe you do too. And you know what? It's okay. Well, wait a minute. When I say it's okay, what I mean is you're not alone. You probably don't think of Mary struggling with bad or off-color language, but she certainly struggled with other things. I have a dear friend who I've never heard cuss. Well, I've heard him cuss so rarely that I can count it on a single hand. This friend has heard me say some things that I'm ashamed ever left my mouth. This friend has sat calmly through my tirades and has never judged me for them. This particular friend's quiet presence in the face of my language over the years has taught me an important lesson. One that has made me more creative and less cuss-happy. Mary is much the same, though I don't ever have moments of actually seeing her face to face. Her quiet calm reminds me that I can choose not to react with the violent language I naturally turn to. Mary has heard it all before, and so has her son. This week, if you're facing the language struggles I am, let's grab hold of her hand together and jump right into her son's lap, where we're sure to find far more interesting things to talk about than the freshly spread stuff on the cornfields. Until next week, my friends, may Mary guide you and your language closer to her Son.
SQPN, leading the way in Catholic new media.